Hello all, welcome back. Now we are going to look at lesson 2 of the second module, and this lesson is about creating virtual machines. So if we look at the overview of this lesson, we'll first create virtual machine using Azure portal, and we will try to connect to that Windows virtual machine, and we will show how to install a web server using Azure portal. And the second part of the demonstration is creating the same virtual machine using PowerShell. And in a third demonstration, we will create Linux virtual machine and how to connect those virtual machines. So when we start creating a virtual machine in the portal, there are set of categories which we need to provide inputs. So if we start with basic details, we have to provide project details and details like administrator account and what are the ports which need to be opened. And second is disk type. Say for example, if we want to add multiple data disk, we can provide those details, and we can specify the size of the OS and data disk as well. And the third category specifies networking. Here we can create or provide existing virtual networks and subnets and any load balancing information if we need to create VMs which needs load balancing. And next part is the management, which helps in enabling monitoring, diagnostic logs, auto shutdown, backups, etc. And finally, the advanced or guest configuration is what we call an automation part. Here we can provide some agents or configuration scripts for the application which we need pre-create as well. And next is tags and reviews, which we know already. We talk about Windows virtual machine in particular. So these virtual machines has unique hybrid capabilities, and some of the components which comes pre-installed as well. And there are like specific virtual machine images for, let's say, PCI DSS compliant ones, or the CAS compliant images as well. This helps in providing multi-layer security, and since the middleware comes with different flavors, it helps in faster innovation, and it is unprecedented hyper converged infrastructure as well. So we can spin up VMs on demand in any region on Azure. So coming to connecting Windows virtual machines, we know for Windows virtual machine we have RDP protocol, which is connected through port 3389, and in addition we can use WinRM to connect. We want to use command line session interface. Now we will switch back to a demonstration on how to create VM in the portal. Now we see Azure portal, and we are going to create a new resource group. We call it WinRG and choose the region as East US. I don't provide any tags, and I directly go ahead and create the resource group. Now I have created the resource group, and we are going to create a new Windows virtual machine. So I click on add, and under the compute you can see Windows server. So if I click on it, I'll be able to choose which those virtual machine image I want to use. So I'll go ahead with Windows Virtual Machine 2016 data center, and I click on create. Here, as I mentioned earlier, we have different details like basics, disk, networking management, and advanced tags and review plus create. So under the basic, we have to provide project details like what is the subscription name, what is the resource group name, and what is the VM name. Here I mentioned WinVM and the region which we need to choose. Let it be East US as well. And here I don't need any redundancy of the infrastructure, but if we want to set up HA, we might need to use this option. And I'm okay with the size of the VM, and I need to provide the administrator account. Let the username be Azure user, and I provide a super secure password. Finally, I can choose which port I need to allow. For this case, I can choose port 80, port 443, and since this is Windows VM, I open RDP port as well. Here, I don't have any existing Windows license, but if you have existing licenses, you can bring those licenses here as well, so you can considerably save the cost. Next section is the disk. Here I choose standard SSD or OS, and I can create a new data disk as well. If I want to store any of the data, I need to choose a data disk. So I can choose 10 GB of data disk, and under the networking, I can create a new virtual network. By default, it creates a virtual network, subnet, and a public IP as well. And it creates an network security group, and it allows 3 ports, which we have already mentioned. And currently, I don't have any load balancer, so I choose the load balancer settings as no. And next part is the management. Here, if you want to enable diagnostic settings, we can enable it here, but at the moment I don't need boot diagnostics. And let the auto shutdown settings be by default, and I don't need any backup as well. Next is the advanced configuration. Here, if we want to choose some other settings, like for Linux, if you want to specify cloud in it, or in Windows, if you want to specify any extension installation, like whenever I need to create a VM, I need to install an antivirus extension. We can provide those details here. And I don't need to provide any tags. Finally, I can review it. And if everything is okay, I can create a virtual machine. As of now, I'm okay with all the details. I'll go ahead and create the VM. Now, after a while, the VM has been created. And if you click on the VM, you are able to see all the details like what is the computer name, operating system size, public IP, private IP, etc. So we can open an ODP session with this public IP and using the credentials which we have already provided during the VM creation, and we'll be able to log into the VM. Now I have switched back to the VM which I have just logged in, and here we are going to install web server on this VM. So we will go to server manager and we can add roles and features, and I select role based or feature based installation. And here I can choose web server IIS. We'll add a bunch of tools and I click on add features, and I don't need any other specific package which needs to be installed. So I click on continue, next, next, and finally install. It will take a while to get it installed, and we will check once it's done. So now the installation has been completed. So we click on close, and we can see now the IIS server is installed as well. Now we'll switch back to browser, and we will try to use this public IP to access the web server page. Now my IIS server is working. So now we can switch back to the next portion of our creation of virtual machine, which is creating VM using PowerShell. Now, similar to how we have used Azure portal to create it step by step, we can do that using PowerShell as well. We can either use a single PowerShell command to create a quick start VM, or we can use a detailed step by step instruction to customize all the options in the VM. So if you look at the options or the step by step instruction which is provided, the first command normally gets the username and password from the user as an interactive input, and second step creates a new virtual machine configurations with VM size, and the third step helps in setting up the OS information, and the fourth step is setting up the particular OS image. In this case, we are trying to set up Windows Server 2016 data center. And fifth step helps in setting the disk size of the VM. And the sixth step is setting the network interface. And seventh step is the creation of actual VM. Now we'll switch back to a demonstration from PowerShell. Now I switch back to the PowerShell, and initially we are trying to create a new resource group. After that, we are setting some variables like VM name, and we are trying to create a new credential object which has the username and password. And finally, we will create new subnet config, and we are going to create a new virtual network and subnet details. And finally, we are going to create a new public IP address, and we are going to create an RDP rule in NSGs, and we are creating those NSG with the RDP rule. Finally, we will create a new network interface, and we will set some of the VM configs as well. And finally, we'll create this VM. I'll try to execute this command, and it will roughly take 5 minutes to create the VM. And we will come back once the VM is created. Now the PowerShell execution has been completed and the VM has been created. So now we can switch back to Azure portal to verify whether all the resources has been created. Now we will check for new resource group called PS demo org, and under this resource group we should be able to see the new VM which is created from PowerShell. So we have set of resources available, and if we click on the VM called my VM, you will be able to see those VM details as well. So now we are able to see all the details. Well, the computer name is my VM, OS details, and other details like size of the VM, VNets, etc. So we have the public IP address which is 23.100.22.78, and we can open an ODP session using this IP address and the credentials which we have provided during the creation of the VM. So that's how we are going to create a new virtual machine using PowerShell, and we'll switch back to the next session. So next is creation of Linux virtual machines. Again, similar to Windows virtual machine, we have a lot of Linux virtual machine images as well, which is built by community and some of the Linux vendors as well. And again, Linux has same deployment options as Windows, like basic details, disk, and other details as well. And we can use many open source DevOps tools to manage those VMs like Chef, Puppet, etc. And coming to connecting the Linux virtual machines, we can use either password or an SSH public key as well. And while creating the VMs, we can choose those options. And if we provide SSH public key, we can directly use passwordless authentication. Now we will look at a demonstration of how to create those one of the Linux virtual machines, and we can try to connect the Linux virtual machines from our terminal. So I'll switch back to browser, and we can create a new resource, and under compute we can go ahead and choose a Linux virtual machine as well, or currently in the popular section I am able to see an Ubuntu server as well. I'll choose that one. So if we look at the basic details, can provide those project details, and here we have options to provide what is the subscription, and I can provide the resource group name as well. Here I can create a new resource group called Linux-org, and I can provide VM name, and I need to choose the region. Let's keep it East US, and here also I don't need any infrastructure redundancy, and I'm okay with the image chosen and the size of the VM. And next thing is either we have to provide the password or the SSH public key as well. So for creating an SSH public key, we can either use some terminal and we can create a set of RSAs. We will have one public key and we will have a private key. So here we need to provide our public key. I choose to provide the public key of my command prompt, and I have provided an username as well. And next, coming to the inbound ports, I choose SSH, and I don't need to add any extra data disk. I'm okay with the premium SSD. And coming to the networking part, I'm okay with creating a new virtual network subnet and a public IP. And I don't need any load balancing options. And under management, I'll disable all the boot diagnostics and I'll leave other options like auto shutdown as default. And I don't need to change any other settings under advanced as well. Finally, I'll go to tags. Here also I'm not adding anything. And finally, under the review plus create option, I'll verify those details and it's running a final validation as well. And I'm okay with all the details which I have provided. And finally, I'll click on create. This will create a new Linux virtual machines. And once it's created, I'll try to connect the VM. So now the VM has been created. And if I go to the VM, I'll be able to see those VM information. Say like image name, Linux VM name, and the IP address details as well. Now I'm able to see the public IP address and I'll copy this public IP and I'll switch back to my terminal and I'll be able to connect to the virtual machine. So I can use SSH and the username at IP address and it's trying to connect. I have accepted the host key and I'm able to successfully log into the VM. So that's how we are going to create a new Linux virtual machine. So that's all in this lesson. And in the next lesson, we are going to look at HA scenarios with virtual machines. Thank you.